Back in 1953, a Canadian quartet released a single entitled Istanbul, Not Constantinople. It was written for the 500th anniversary of the fall of the city of Constantinople to the Ottomans. The lyrics read, Istanbul was Constantinople. Now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. Been a long time gone, Constantinople. Now it's Turkish delight on a moonlit night. And then the second verse is this. So take me back to Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone, Constantinople. Why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. It was a catchy song and a fun song to sing, and it's still part of the American and Canadian musical psyche after all these years. But the lyrics are more than a novelty. They express the historic complexity of the land of Turkey and the dramatic changes that land has seen through the centuries. And it is true that many of these changes are nobody's business but the Turks. Whenever we run trips to Turkey, our guests always ask, who are the Turks and where did they come from? And why is Turkey called Turkey? These are great questions, particularly when you are familiar with the stories of the book of Acts and the journeys of the Apostle Paul and his letters that paint a much different picture, a much different cultural and religious picture of the same land than the one we see today. The story of the Turks and Turkey is an intriguing story. But to answer this question of who are the Turks, let's start at the early beginning of the city that is today known as Istanbul. Legend has it that prior to the Greek classical period, around the 8th or 7th century BC, a Greek king by the name of Byzas left his home of Megara near Athens in Greece with his people, and they settled in the small peninsula that today is the old city of Istanbul. There may have been a small Thracian fishing village there at that time, but he made it a new Greek city and named it after himself as Byzantion, or as it is pronounced in Latin, Byzantium. The land of Turkey at that time was inhabited by various ethnic tribal groups such as Phrygians and Lycians and Cappadocians, Bithynians and Thracians, probably descendants and remnants of the ancient Hittite people and the Hurrian people and Luwian people that originally inhabited the area known as Anatolia. But this move by Byzas introduced Greek culture and philosophy to the region, which continued to spread throughout Anatolia. In the 4th century BC, the conquests of Alexander the Great brought the area fully under Greek dominion, and by then the various tribal groups, while still maintaining some cultural distinctives, had essentially lost their ancient languages and had become fully Greek, using the Greek language and following Greek philosophy. This continued into the Roman era, so that by the time of the Apostle Paul's journeys through the region, the people of Anatolia were fully what we would call Greco-Roman people. Byzantium became a major city of the ancient world, since it sat at the crossroads between Europe and Asia, as well as the gateway between the Black Sea and Central and Far East Asia to the east, and the Mediterranean and the great empires of Greece and Rome to the west. It could really be described as the most important city of the ancient world. In fact, Byzantium became known simply as the city, tes polis in Greek. This status continued to the 4th century AD when the Roman emperor, a guy known as Constantine the Great, decided to move the capital city of the Roman Empire from Rome to Byzantium in order to unify both the eastern and the western regions of the empire. He changed the name of the city at first to Nea Rome, or New Rome, and then later named it after himself as Constantinopolis, or Constantinople, the city of Constantine. This move would prove advantageous to the Roman Empire, especially when the Western Roman Empire of Europe fell to the invading Germanic tribes of the Goths and the Vandals in the 5th century AD. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Byzantium, or Constantinople, endured another 1,000 years after the fall of Europe. This empire became known by historians as the Byzantine Empire, though the Byzantines simply referred to themselves as Romans. Those of you who have been to Israel with us have heard about the Byzantine era. This is the early imperial Christian era, which technically began when Constantine the Great converted to Christianity in the 4th century and permitted and also fostered the practice of the Christian faith and religion throughout the empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire, at its height, under an emperor known as Justinian, ruled from Europe through Anatolia into the Middle East and across North Africa. Yet as the centuries ensued, the Byzantine Empire waxed and waned in its dominion over these regions. Now, meanwhile, in the far-off reaches of Central Asia, in the Altai Mountains, which stretch across the borders of China, Mongolia, and Siberia, ancient nomadic tribes of herdsmen were weaving carpets and trading in wool and horses. These were the Turk people, known simply as the Turks. In the 7th century AD, the Muslim Umayyad Arabs led a series of conquests into Central Asia. There they encountered the Turks. The Arabs enslaved the Turkish people and moved them west into Persia and as far as Damascus, using them as servants in their homes and in their palaces. And it was during this time that the Turks were exposed to Islam and adopted the religion as well as the Arabic script for writing the Turkish language. During the following dynasty, the Abbasid dynasty of the Muslims in the 9th century, the Arabs trained the Turks as soldiers and used them to fight their battles. The Turks became skilled warriors. When the Abbasid dynasty, however, declined, the Turks, of course, assumed military and political control themselves over various provincial areas of Persia and Syria, and tribal dynasties among these Turks arose. The most prominent of these dynasties at that time was the Seljuk Turks, who by the 11th century AD had conquered land from Asia across Persia into Syria and into eastern Anatolia. In 1071, they encountered the Byzantine Empire at the Battle of Manzikert in eastern Anatolia, a battle that they decisively won, even capturing the Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. The Turks assumed control of most of Anatolia at that time, but the city of Constantinople continued to be held by the Byzantines and would be for nearly another 400 years. However, by the 12th century, Europeans had already begun to call Anatolia Turkey because of the predominance of the Turkish people. In the 13th century, the Mongols invaded Anatolia and defeated the Seljuk Turks, and this was an important move. This scattered the Turkish people across Turkey and allowed other Turkish tribes to assume control of other areas of Turkey, particularly in western Turkey. By the beginning of the 14th century, a new Turkish leader had risen to power. His name was Osman, also sometimes pronounced Utman, and he became the first sultan of the Ottoman Empire. The Byzantines continued to wane in power and control, and by the middle of the 15th century, a descendant of Osman by the name of Mehmet, or Mehmet the Conqueror as he was known, laid siege to Constantinople and took control of it. It was the year 1453. The Turks called the city Istanbul, which most historians believe came from the Greek phrase Eistenpolen. You can hear the similarity there, meaning to the city in Greek. Let's go Eistenpolen. Let's go to Istanbul. Let's go to the city, and the city, of course, being Byzantium or Constantinople. After 1453, the Ottoman Empire continued for another 450 years, assuming control not only of Turkey, but also of the Middle East and parts of Arabia across North Africa. The empire finally came to an end, losing its land holdings across the Middle East and Arabia with its defeat at the end of World War I in 1918. That brings that up to the modern era now. Between 1918 and 1923, then, a grassroots movement of Turks in opposition to the Ottoman Empire overthrew the Ottoman rule in Turkey and instituted the Republic of Turkey. Its founder and leader was a man named Mustafa Kemal Pasha, also known simply as Ataturk. And he brought sweeping reforms to Turkey, which are still celebrated today, and aligned the country with Western values, with Western culture, and with Western modernization. He even abandoned the use of the Arabic alphabet in favor of the Latin alphabet for writing the Turkish language in order to connect Turkey to Europe. So to this day, Turkey, and especially Istanbul, remain a bridge between Europe and Asia. In fact, when you are in Turkey, you sense that it is somewhat European and somewhat Asian. You encounter a unique blend of cultures and histories that make up the country of Turkey today. It is a country full of ancient legends, of biblical stories, and of modern traditions. A fascinating journey awaits all of you who travel to Turkey with GTI. And so we're inviting you to come join us for a Turkish delight on a moonlit night in Turkey. We can't wait to show it to you.